Welcome to Ich bin so frei, or in English, Taking Liberty. It's a podcast focusing on freedom, women, and how to shape our future in a meaningful way. My name is Zoe van Vink, and one of my goals with this podcast is to bring expert female voices to the forefront of debates. So today I'm talking to social entrepreneur Marta Foresti. Marta is a lot. She's a Londoner, Italian, philosopher, single mom of 2 children, dancer, cyclist, researcher on cities, migration and more, and changemaker. In short, a woman who gets things done. She recently quit her job of nearly 20 years in policy research to create something new. She has founded LAGO, Local Actions on Global Opportunities. It's a new collective focusing on cities, creativity, and the movement of talent and ideas. We talk about her journey getting there and why and how she wants to do something new. We discuss why we need a new narrative, new stories on the common destiny of Africa and Europe based on cooperation and opportunities. As an example, she highlights the collaboration on fashion, textile and design between the mayors of Freetown in Sierra Leone and Milan, Italy, which was launched last June during Milan Design Week. She wants to work with designers, artists and innovators to connect them with policymakers and other leaders interested in exploring different solutions to unresolved, wicked global problems. So everyone who wants to get inspired by a multi-talented, energetic woman, tune in and listen to the very end. There's a little surprise by an artist from Sierra Leone. Hello, Marta. Nice to see you.
Hello, Zoe. Nice to see you too.
So tell us, who are you?
So I'm Marta. I am 51 years old, which is always an interesting age to mention. There is something about the 50 mark and then going beyond when one is tempted to remain 50 forever. But no, I'm 51 years old. I'm a Londoner. I've been a Londoner for 25 years and more. And being a Londoner is a nice way of having to avoid defining oneself with a nationality, but I am also very much Italian to begin with. So I was born and bred in Milan. I'm a single mum of 2 wonderful kids, Bianca and Luca, 14 and 11, who are at school right now. I'm very much a dancer and a cyclist and a European in Brexit London, which has been actually a defining feature of a number of us in the last few years.
You're so many things. So what motivates you?
Well, of course, many things therefore motivate me. It's interesting. It really is a combination. One thing that really motivates me is a sense of purpose. I'm a doer. I like to get things done. And so when I think, it almost really doesn't matter what, but if there are opportunities to, overcome a problem or trying to get things done is something that, keeps me going quite a bit. And I'm a pragmatist. And so what also motivates me is finding ways, to overcome problem and trying to find solutions and be quite hands-on. But finally, perhaps if there's one thing that really motivates me more than anything else, is a sense of wonder. I am very easily inspired by people, by new things, and I go after things that feel new and inspiring and where I can see potential. So a combination of hands-on and a bit of a sense of wonder.
And what is your favorite morning routine to get you going?
So I have 2 morning routines. One is my kids. I get them out of bed early to make sure they get to school, make sure they get some breakfast, make sure the PE kit is in order and all of that. And the second routine, which is very much my own, is black coffee. 1, maybe 2 cups of black coffee. And typically the second one, if I manage, is either, when they've left or maybe the first one before they're up, so that I try to carve out a little minute of silence before the day begins.
That sounds nice. And what do you do when things don't go as planned?
So I'm actually not much of a planner. I'm more of a juggler. I tend to have in my head the things that I know need to be done, and I, follow a little bit my instinct is what matters more than others, which I have been commenting with other middle-aged friends recently. That is a bit of a challenge because you need to rely a lot on your memory and your sense of, remembering what really is important, and that gets a little bit harder with age. But yes, so a bit of a juggler. Therefore, when a ball drops, it is not the end of the world in some ways, as others remain in the air. Perhaps when things don't go as planned and therefore some balls drop, the key that I've been trying to learn and hopefully getting better at is to notice that things drop and don't go to plans, and to leave them behind if for whatever reason, the plans, the things are not proceeding. So what I mean is to try not to, keep everything going all the time, almost for the sake of it, but to be aware of things that may be initiated and not go the way I imagined, and that's fine. And you can move on, pursue what seems to be working better. So dropping some balls and not worry too much about that.
It also sounds relaxing in a way, when you're not too strict with your focus and your planning.
Yes, it can be relaxing. I know over the years there have been instances, particularly professionally, where it might not work well if others are, more appreciative of planning. People around me can be a little bit overwhelmed sometimes by, trying to do too much at once. So I had to learn a little bit to manage that. So, but yes, I find not being too driven by predetermined plans relaxing and genuinely useful to learn, and to be open to what might come next. And I like the fact that it means that I don't, I tend to see opportunities rather than obstacles in things that happen around me.
Sounds very positive. So tell us a little bit about your journey. What did you do until now?
So the journey, and I think about the journey in more or less an adult life and professional life, starts in Milan via Brussels, actually Amsterdam before, and Brussels, London, Rome, back to London. So it's a bit of a European journey in terms of the geography of it. So I grew up in Milan, and that's where I began getting interested in politics and in policy making, mainly working with a local school, with an after-school club for students that I worked on with a few friends of mine when I was at university. And then this passion for policies and politics brought me to Brussels for a quite short stint in European institutions, which was helpful to understand how large international bureaucracies work. It came in very handy later on in my career. Amsterdam was actually before I was a student in Amsterdam for a few months. I actually studied philosophy of science, which has nothing to do with what I ended up doing in life, but it was actually a great passion earlier on in my life. But coming back to policies, my journey took me through, a series, a number of places of policymaking, particularly in sort of economic and social policymaking, both locally. So starting very locally in Milan, I mentioned Europe. I then worked for a few years when I first came to London in the early days of the Blair-Brown governments, where New Labour developed a number of new social policies. And I started to work in research, in applied research in social and economic policies. And then in around 1999, I made the move to more international work, and I started working more international development and in development policies at Save the Children, which is a large charity that works in the aid industry. But then I moved back to the local level. I then went and worked for a few years in Rome at the Ministry of Finance, at the heart of the Italian government, working very much with regional and local policymaking and local economic development, particularly in the Italian South. And finally, in the last 16, 17 years, I've been working. I came back to London and I went back to work on global and international development, work in a policy think tank, so largely doing research and advisory in the policy space. So it's been a quite long, tortuous journey, as I said, across this global-local divide, very much focused on economic and social policies, and up to now, very much focused on knowledge production, on fundamentally research and analysis that can be used by policymakers to try to improve people's lives in key sectors like education, health, and the economy.
I recently saw a post from you of social media saying that something drastic happened in your life and that you're going to change jobs. So what happened? What triggered that decision?
What happened is that I realized that I wanted to do something different. And actually, is drastic in that I am leaving a job and not going to another one, which is the normal trajectory that you would expect for people, particularly people who had a sort of, relatively senior career in public policy. So I'm trying to do something new, but I see it very much as a continuum to what I've been doing thus far. What happened is I began to wonder about the relative effort of working, as I said, to produce knowledge, to produce analysis, to publish knowledge and analysis largely in the written form. So through policy papers, and of course then an effort to try to disseminate this knowledge, to try to get it to the attention of people who can change, you can influence policies and change, decisions. And in the last about 5-6 years of my professional life, I've been focusing very much on migration as an area, a policy area. And that's where I really learned the limits of trying to influence a highly political debate, just producing evidence and knowledge and fact, trying to shift attitudes or trying to create space for a different sort of political conversation around the realities of the fact that people move between places. And I started to really wonder about what else I could do to try to tell the story of the movement of people between places, which is a story, of the human race, is the story of probably me, you, maybe our grandparents, maybe moved from one place to another, from the countryside to the city. And so that's where I started to become increasingly interested in non-written forms of communications, and particularly working with creatives, in particular with designers, with people that use a different language, a different set of tools to communicate ideas, and particularly ideas about something that remains very controversial and potentially very polarizing in the policy and political space. And the work I've done, particularly with information designers, with an information designer called Federica Fragapane, communicating particularly the story of the contribution of migrant workers to the COVID response, and then most recently on public attitudes to migration refugees in Europe. And then most recently working with the city of Freetown and the mayor of the city of Freetown and the mayor of the city of Milan, who are working together to try to create opportunities for young people in the creative sectors, particularly in fashion and design, to work together across African and European countries and cities to create, to co-create, new design and ideas. It really encouraged me to think beyond the space that normally research and think tank operate, to see whether I could do more to bring some of these voices, some of these creative voices closer to those who need to be influenced to make decisions about policies like migration and others. I also felt strongly, particularly working with mayors in African and European cities, that I really want to work more closely, more closer to where the policy becomes a reality, a delivery and an action for people. So working with cities really inspired me to perhaps work more, closer to that sort of delivery end. And so I decided that I could put to use all the networks, the knowledge, the funding also that over the years I learned to generate to fund some of this innovative creative work and give it more of its own space, and not as a subset, if you want, of the research and the knowledge production that I've been working on thus far. And so I have very recently sort of left my job in the think tank of ODI, but very much with the support of ODI, which is a leading London-based think tank on global policies, developing a new platform called LAGO, which stands for Local Actions on Global Opportunities, that will focus really on mainly three things to try to sort of close the gap between global issues and local action. One is sort of give voice and visibility to the creative sectors, also as potential to create jobs and opportunities at the local level and for new generations of creatives. The second is working with cities and particularly supporting mayors to create coalitions with other policymakers that are engaged on sort of global issues like, for example, climate change. And then thirdly, I mentioned how I worked on migration in the last few years, and I got very frustrated by trying to work on migration policy, mainly because of the highly polarized debate that exists on, on whether borders should be open or closed. And I've been thinking for some time that I really wanted to focus on, whether there was something concrete again that we could focus on that could inspire a different kind of relationship with the reality of human mobility. And that's where, with a few fellow sort of colleagues and fellow travelers, I am developing some ideas to do some work around visas. And so to show how, visa and the possibility of visiting a country and how long it takes to obtain visas and how much that can come in the way to creating opportunities for people to connect, is increasingly becoming is a victim of some of the debates we've got on migration. So I'm trying to basically, with LAGO, I'm trying to find very concrete entry points where there are communities of reformers, creatives that are doing something a bit different to try to move the dial on this complex global debate by activating either local actions or local actors' creative minds, and also trying to find alternative entry points for wicked problems that remain unresolved in the global space.
There's so many questions that kind of come up right now. So, just to take a step back, is that a new way, rather than only writing policy papers, is that just, a different way of trying to change policy, saying that you've done enough papers and now you're just trying something new?
Yes, there is an element of that. And in a way, that's why there is continuity in what I'm doing, because of course, the fact that writing papers is not enough and that communications is an integral part of policy, influencing policies is a well-known reality for policy researchers all, the world around. I guess my discovery, working particularly with information designers, is the potential that there is in the design process itself to discover not just new ways of saying the same idea, but actually to come up with different ideas that are, that emerge in the process of design itself. Let me give you a very concrete example. I've been one of the issues with the way in which migration flows are often described is that it often relies on images and words that relate, for example, to, metaphors like invasions or crisis or, movements, the arrows, remember all the maps that we've seen with arrows of people moving from one place to the next. Working with Federica, the information designer I've been working for in the last few years, trying to find new ways of not just communicating the ideas, but also engaging perhaps new audiences and new minds and new actors in some of this debate. We came up with the use of a mountain metaphor. So the stratification of a mountain. So something that has been around for a very long time that, inevitably grows over the centuries, and using that metaphor to describe, in this case, the ways in which, there is stratification in the opinions that, public has in Europe about the pro and cons of migration. And so this work on the creative sectors is both a new way or a new language to communicate old ideas, if you want, or something that can be written in a paper, but is also in and of itself a process of discovery where you can, unlock, new metaphors, new ideas, new language, and new actually ways of working and doing things. But the other aspect that I am very interested in the creative sector, and is primarily the work I've been doing in the fashion industry for the last couple of years, is how much the culture and the creative sectors are themselves drivers of development. And so creative sectors create jobs, and the fact that there is a bit of an undiscovered or relatively undervalued sort of dimension of the global debate on what drives development. And so it's a combination of factors, is a desire to find new ways to communicate, but also to find new sectors, new entry points, new ways to unlock the potential of human talent, which we may or may not pick up, in traditional framing and traditional ways of working.
So tell me a bit more about fashion, because this sounds exciting. So I think you organized a fair together with Mayor of Milan and some African mayors in African states. Tell me more.
So now this is actually something that two mayors have, come up with and decided to do. So this is the mayor, as it happens, of my own city of Milan, and Beppe Sala, and the mayor of Freetown in Sierra Leone, Ivona Kisoyer. They started to work together a couple of years ago now. They decided that while the relationship between Africa and Europe continues to be a fractured one, and I would say with the war in Ukraine is become even harder to find common ground and to create priorities around Africa-Europe collaboration. So they felt that as mayors of African European cities, they could come together to try to find very practical ways to create more of an alliance and a bridge between the two continents, and specifically, again, thinking at the common grounds that exist between cities, and the fact that people move in and across and between cities on both sides of the Mediterranean. And so they established with fellow African European mayors, about 20 cities. They've established a network called the Africa-Europe Mayors Dialogue. But specifically the two mayors of Milan and Freetown, they came up with fashion. They were looking for sectors where they could very tangibly show the potential of collaborative efforts between African European cities. And fashion came up because it's an emerging sector in Sierra Leone that, unlike neighboring countries like Nigeria and Ghana, has less visibility and less support internationally, but with a kind of a vibrant emerging industry, both in terms of design, but also in the textile production, particularly around traditional techniques on tie-dye. And Milan, of course, is a very well-known established capital in the fashion industry, but suffering from demographic trends with sort of, fewer younger people, perhaps an industry that needs renewal, new ideas, and with particular moment of industry, particularly in the textile manufacturing sectors, for sustainable textile production that, where Africa and Sierra Leone in particular in relation to tie-dye has an interest. And so they felt that they could sort of together create concrete opportunities for exchanges of designers, to establish also linkages between fashion schools in Milan that could sort of support and work together with some of the talents in Sierra Leone, but also opportunities for investment from the textile industry in Italy and beyond in Sierra Leone. And that project remained a bit of a dream for a couple of years until we, myself and other colleagues at ODI, established a connection with the Sierra Leone diaspora in London, because of course London is where a lot of the Sierra Leone diaspora is, and there is a very vibrant community in the creative industries in fashion design, music from Sierra Leone in London. And so, that created an opportunity to bring that dream to life. And so a number of things are happening and will happen very soon also on this. First, we have started to create, so we have organized a couple of exchange visits between some of the designers from Freetown with fellow Sierra Leone and other West Africa diaspora designers in London, including showcasing some of the work in London Fashion Week. We also co-produced an artistic documentary by a Sierra Leone artist that interviews and speaks to the mayor of Freetown, and then shows the potential of the creative industry in Freetown. And, only last week that we screened the film at a sort of very senior level conference in Vienna with European policymakers to show, the reality of the creative sectors in the city of Freetown. It was recently screened at the V&A, where there is a major exhibition on African fashion. I'm off next week to Dundee, Scotland, at the V&A Design Museum of Scotland to discuss ideas for collaborations, including at the festival that you mentioned, which is the really important Festival of Milan Design Week, where we actually had both mayors speak at an event organized by IKEA. So we're using fashion and increasingly other creative sectors, and we're particularly keen to expand on design, where there is a very strong manufacturing base also in Milan and a lot of emerging talent in African countries, to show how the movement of people, but also the movement of talent, of ideas, the movement of fabrics between the two continents can create opportunities on both sides, both in terms of strengthening the industry in Sierra Leone, particularly creating opportunities for more, for extending the market to perhaps regional or even global opportunities, but also investment opportunities for the Italian and manufacturers, and really, through the London-based diaspora, really create an amplifying platforms for, the collective of not just African in general, but in this case specifically Sierra Leone talents that exist, not just in Sierra Leone, but in different parts of the world. So is an example which I would like to replicate in other creative sectors. As I said, I have my eyes in particular on design. There is a strong element of music. The most important Sierra Leone rapper features in the film and was modeling some of the creations of some of our designers in London, and has just produced a single with Idris Elba, which of course is a very well-known member of the Sierra Leone diaspora in London. So really it just gives you a flavor of the potential when you start to liberate, the minds and talents, and curating a little bit this relationship and these opportunities for exchange. And I'm particularly proud of the fact that I was able to mobilize financial resources from a couple of European foundations that will normally fund, more traditional, if you want, work in this space, to really try to take a little bit of a risk and take the plunge to try to support more creative work. And he's actually talking about, there is also a nice German dimension here. We're discussing with Deutsche Welle an interesting, we discussed in the past in covering the story, and he's creating a lot of curiosity and interest.
And for people who are listening to this and think, wow, Marta is on track, I want to get involved, how can I, read more about this? Where can they go to?
So there is a fair amount that I've done thus far that is in the public domain. There will be some links to this podcast, to a recent blog I wrote about the potential of the creative industries. There is, as of recently, a couple of posts on social media where I explain the plan for LAGO and what I'm trying to do, and a lot of engagement around social media, mostly Twitter and LinkedIn. You can look me up. I am learning the ropes of shifting from being a casual Instagram user to something a little bit more professional. Soon enough, LAGO will have its own website, and I'm very much busy building the network of individuals that I'm working with in this new phase. So watch out for a website, but in the meantime, do look me up on social media for actually a very lively ongoing debate on all of those issues, and for op-eds and other articles, resources, including, the trailer of the film that I mentioned called Freedom of Movement, the connections with some of these wonderful designers from Sierra Leone, particularly Labrum, which is a London-based Sierra Leone fashion label, and Julian Knox, who is the artist that I've been working with on the film. Also look up Mayor Aki Sawyer, who is the mayor of Freetown, who is very much a champion and a voice on this work. But all of this will come together on an online platform for LAGO in due course.
Excellent. Maybe you can send me the music of the rapper, and then I can blend it in at the end. That would be wonderful.
I'll do that. There is the trailer of the film has a quite nice sound. I mean, the film in its entirety is not available on social media. Like, we're screening it in different places, but the trailer is, and you can also use that.
Excellent. I will add all of the links. So finally, what is your outlook for the future?
So what I really hope, if I look sort of 10 years down the line, it's difficult not to frame all of this in terms of, success or failure. But what I really hope is that I will have created very concrete opportunities for individuals and communities, to have come together to co-create something. So already some of what I mentioned on, some of the artists and the designers and the mayors, there is so much more that I can do to close that gap and create opportunities for collaboration between local innovators and policymaking. And so the outlook, what I hope is that a few years down the line, the creativity of designers, artists, musicians will be something that inspires policymakers around the world, and I would have done my bit to creating some of those opportunities to meet and perhaps think a little bit differently at what can be done to, for our collective future.
Well, thank you for this wonderful initiative. I'm already very inspired. I lived in Ghana for a while, and I loved all those fabrics back there. Always wondering why we couldn't buy them in Europe. So I see so much potential just in the fashion sector. Good luck with everything, and thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you, Zoe. I have a nice thing to say about Ghana. I'll tell you now, all the Sierra Leone tailors I'm working with are very frustrated that in Sierra Leone, everybody wants a Ghanaian tailors. So,
we might cut this out.
and how they can, because Ghana is so much, is better known, of course, in the creative space. So it's interesting, all this different perceptions. So from a Sierra Leone perspective, gaining a little bit of grounds from Ghana and Nigeria is
Sorry, then
No, it's fine. It's just it's interesting, is what these things are. And, anyway, great.
Kids play in the sky, locked narratives in their mouths, waiting to tell their stories. They hold seashells to each ear to hear what's said